This is Boomer Time, a proactive podcast for baby boomers, about baby boomers, and for people taking care of baby boomers. If that sounds like you, then you're in the right place. I'm Nancy Kogar, an elder law attorney and aging advocate, and this podcast was made just for you. Remember, though, the things we discuss here are not intended to be legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established by this podcast. Hello, everyone. This is Boomer Time, and I'm your host, Nancy Kogar. I hope this finds you well today. We're talking about a challenging subject involving the aftermath of a dementia diagnosis. What do you do after that kind of diagnosis? First of all, if this is you, or you're listening to this as someone that is in some kind of role as a caregiver of a loved one with dementia, please know that you are not alone. Based on the most recent numbers out there, in fact, there are an estimated 6.7 million people out there who have been diagnosed with some form of dementia. Of course, there are all different types of this cognitive illnesses, most commonly referred to as probably Alzheimer's, but there are others that impair your mental capacity, including Parkinson's, Sundowners, Lewy Body Syndrome. There's a variety, and millions of Americans are struggling with these types of illnesses. Even more so, though, Americans are also finding themselves in a role of caregiver, and more than likely an unpaid caregiver. So based on that same report that I cited earlier, there are an estimated 48 million people in this country in some form of a caregiver role, and both the numbers of individuals requiring care and those stepping into the role of caregiver is skyrocketing. There's an estimated 14 million Americans that will be diagnosed with some form of dementia by 2060. That's really alarming. And if you've been hanging out with me for a while now and listening to Boomer Time, you know that this is one of the very reasons I established this podcast. I'm an elder law and estate planning attorney here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I help lots of people with these same issues. And I can help you too. I'll provide some contact information later on in the show, but I also want to provide some what I think is really good, vetted, and helpful information here as well. And I'm doing all this because I care. The silver tsunami, it's called, the nickname, or the aging of America is upon us. And all we baby boomers are aging over 65. And at some point in the next 30 years or so, there are going to be more older people in this country than any others. That's going to change things. You bet your bottom dollar, and present some challenges, obviously. The key, I think, is to be prepared. And that's why I'm hoping that the major takeaway from Boomer Time is be prepared. I care about you. I care about your loved ones. There is nothing that makes me more upset to see a family or an older individual on the opposite side of some issue where they didn't do what they were supposed to do, or they didn't do it right, and now they find themselves in a complex mess, and their family members are right there with them. Please do not do that to yourself, and I'm trying to change that trend if I can. So on today's episode of Boomer Time, we're going to be tackling a tough but important topic, and I hope you'll come in close, get rid of those distractions, and listen to me. Take notes, okay? I guarantee you that if you listen through to the end today, you're going to be more encouraged and empowered than you were before we started, okay? So, what do you do after a dementia diagnosis? I think it's important to talk about the repercussions of a dementia-related diagnosis, because you will find, like I said, that it's not always the same disease, and it's not always at the same stage in a person with such a diagnosis. But most often, such a diagnosis does mean that there may already be some cognitive decline, or it's coming. And the individual with the diagnosis needs to look at both a short-term plan and a longer-term plan. And the caregiver, of course, needs to be a part of that too. Really, the whole family needs to be a part of it, but that's not always possible. You'll want those who will approach this in a proactive, loving, and caring manner. That's absolutely necessary. So today we're talking about more short term, and I'll do another episode talking more about the long term plans. But what do you do first? Well, as you know, I'm a person of faith, and I would say the first thing I would do, and I believe it's helpful, is pray. This is a significant change in your life circumstance, and you and your family are going to need good wisdom about the next steps in the road ahead. Your church may have a grief ministry or even a dementia support group. I'm going to be meeting with one of those in a couple weeks, and I'll tell you about that. There are also several in town, and I'll put some of that information on my website so you can find some of those. But spending some time in prayer, I think, will help bring some clarity and calm to the circumstance. Because you're going to have to meditate on this, and you should not respond out of fear, anxiety, or panic. That never leads to good decisions. Secondly, you're going to want to talk with your loved ones about the diagnosis. Don't wait on this, okay? Open and honest conversations are the best. And you may find that these family members want to be involved in the process and come alongside you after it. Remember, I mentioned that 43 million Americans are in some kind of caregiving role now. And, for the most part, this is a volunteer team, and the ranks are building. So if you don't have anyone to stand alongside you, then there are organizations that can help with that. There is help available regardless, and I will put those resources online too. Well, next I'm going to tackle some of the legal aspects of, a diagnosis, because of course I'm a lawyer. But first we're going to take a break. Stick with me and we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Nancy Kogar, and this is Boomer Time. Today we are talking about what to do after a dementia diagnosis. Tough stuff. And I'm hoping you're going to find what I've already shared and what I'm about to share helpful in making some initial plans. So now I'm going to tackle some of the legal aspects of the issues that need to be addressed following a diagnosis. Obviously, you need to put some planning in place for you and your estate. And this planning needs to be specific. Trust me on that. Trust me on that. I'll say that twice. Okay? You will not benefit from some generic or online document. Okay? I would rather see you go to legal aid or one of those charitable organizations than try to do this on your own. This is very complex, and there are a lot of factors involved, okay? You really need to sit down with an elder law and estate planning attorney, like me. Doesn't have to be me, but somebody who has that background, okay? They will have the right mindset and knowledge base to understand the issues that you may face on the road ahead. So I'm going to go over some of those. Also, here's a thought. I see this come up often. If you've had estate planning done previously, now is the time to dust all that off and have it reviewed. Chances are you may have had that done when your kids were young. And, a lot's changed in 25, 30 years. Laws change, people change, options change, and you change. So get it reviewed. Other than that, here are some of the documents that I believe are essential as you age, especially if you've had a dementia diagnosis. Don't wait on this, okay? Do it now, because you need the requisite capacity, or what legally we call sound mind, to make these documents. If you don't have that sound mind or capacity, you can't make them. And your loved ones are going to have to look at other options when you become unable to care for yourself and your affairs. Those options can be very costly. If you can avoid that, please do. And the best way to do that is to get the right estate planning documents in place. You're going to need the following, okay? You're going to need a last will and testament and or a trust. And remember, I told you, the state is a statutory formality state. That means if your document doesn't meet the standards, it may not even be valid. Okay? So don't do it yourself. I think I talked about that on do-it-yourself wills lead to disasters. Go back and listen to that again. Trusts can help you avoid probate. They can provide very specifically for you and your beneficiaries and your assets. There's all kinds of trusts. So you need to talk to someone who understands that. So wills and or trusts. You need a healthcare power of attorney. It has to be durable, okay? It has to be lasting through that incapacity. And it can go into effect upon your incapacity. It just needs to be durable so that it doesn't lapse. You need a living will. That living will gives your healthcare agent some discretion to make decisions for you if you're needing care that's outside the contemplation of the healthcare power of attorney. You also need an end-of-life directive. So this is end of life. What kind of care do you and don't you want? I've talked about that before too. You have a constitutional right to reject or refuse medical treatment, but can't do that when you're unconscious or incapacitated. You need to make these decisions now. Okay. And the reason I have both a living will and end of life directive, because you hear those used interchangeably. During COVID, remember that? I had more than one call from people that were fighting with ICU doctors about having their loved ones on respirators. And the end of life directive said at the end of their life, they didn't want to be on a respirator. Well, I don't think that was what they meant, but it led to a dispute. So I have included both a living will, which gives your healthcare agent some discretion because we don't know what treatments are available in the future, and the more specific end-of-life directive. So this is why you need people that are around these issues and, can add some context and, just real-life experience. So you also need, I think, final disposition of your remains, funeral arrangements. All those things are important to do in advance. So that's as to your physical body. You also need another kind of power of attorney that's called a durable general or financial power of attorney. And this is going to appoint someone you trust to make decisions as to your personal affairs when you no longer can make those decisions. This person will be a fiduciary, which means they'll have certain duties to act on your behalf and in your best interest. Choose carefully, and I always recommend an alternative in both of these POAs. If you need more help with how to pick some of these people, I'm going to have resources on my website, so check that out, okay? And if you don't have these documents, your loved ones or the individual that would be otherwise appointed to help may not be able to do the things that you need them to do. It's just that simple. You're also going to want to review your beneficiary designations on life insurance policies or payable on death accounts, transfer on death accounts. Make sure that these are all up to date. Oftentimes I see where there was one and there wasn't another, and they were never updated. These are important decisions to be made about your health and personal affairs moving forward. I know this can seem overwhelming for people, oftentimes, especially after, a diagnosis, but please do not skip this. You will be very sorry that you did. Also, if you have a cognitive disease, it is advisable, and I do this often, that you have a capacity letter in your file and that would support the making of these documents. I do that often, as I said, because if there's any question down the road about your faculties at the time you made these documents, that, in my opinion, is a quick way to end it. Otherwise, a dispute may gain some ground, some fire, and lead to a possible court action, even a will contest or conservatorship petition. I really want you to think on these desires as far as your advanced care. You need to ask yourself questions like, where do you want to receive that care? You want to be at home, or do you want, you want to have the ability to be in a nursing home or memory care unit? Who do you want to provide that care? Your kids, professionals, hired people? And how will you pay for it? How can you best use your assets? Is there any help available? What can you do to add things to your house to make it more accessible for you in the long run and allow you to stay there longer? There's a worksheet available, another worksheet, you know how I love resources, that will help you work through some of this, and I'm going to have that on my website too. That's nancycogar.com, right? Another note, couple notes actually, as far as Medicare is concerned. Medicare is the kind of care you get from the government when you turn 65. So I'm talking Medicare. So note that Medicare covers advanced care planning as part of your annual wellness visits, okay? And you can include a discussion with your primary care physician as part of that planning. Also, Medicare is now having a pilot program where they offer training to caregivers. And your Medicare may pay for that too. So I will have both of those resources on my website. That is a brand new program. So I'm interested to see what happens with that. The worksheets that I'm giving you even have some questions as far as guidance on, as I said, who you can choose or should choose, a healthcare agent or proxy to make decisions for you when you cannot. All right. Well, I'm going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I want to talk about pulling some information together in one place that I think will be a real benefit for you following this kind of diagnosis. Okay? So stick with me. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Boomer Time. I know this is some difficult content we're talking about today, so I thought it would be good to take a breather, okay? Remember, I wanted to buy you a cup of coffee. I always think coffee leads to really good conversations, and I have two winners that I wanted to talk about that I want to buy a cup of coffee for, and that is Pamela and Joyce. Thank you both for listening, and thank you for your great feedback. And I am so excited to sponsor this cup of coffee for you, and I hope it leads to a really great discussion. We're going to be reaching out to you to coordinate getting that to you. And also for all of you out there, we are going to pick two more in our next episode, so stay tuned. Let me know how that coffee goes, Pam and Joyce, too. I like to know that it helped with a really good conversation. A cup of joe always helps with that. So, okay, back to our topic. So in addition to the estate planning and the long-term care planning that is critical, and I'm going to talk more about that in another episode, I have another suggestion for you today. This is more kind of what do you do after a diagnosis? And this one involves gathering important documents and information together in one central place. This can be as simple as a 3-ring binder with those plastic sleeves in it. You can put things inside of there and they're protected, and we'll know where to find them. Okay, I want you to have everything in one place. And here's some of the things I would recommend that you include in that binder. Okay. A copy of your driver's license. Don't put your driver's license in there, but just put a copy of it so we have the information available. And then while you're at it, proof of insurance for vehicles and for your real estate, and the contact information for any local agent that you may have a relationship with already. So I'm talking about declaration pages that show the coverage and have the contact information on them. Those should be in this binder, both for vehicles and real estate. And if you have any other kind of policies, some people do, but those are usually the main ones. Put a copy of your passport in there. We may need that. I'm not sure, what the future holds. Definitely, if you served in the military, and thank you for your service, put your military discharge paperwork in there, especially your DD-214, okay? I had a client come who had listened to one of my podcasts, and she brought her DD-214 to me, and I was so excited. So she said, you said bring this, and she did. So if you've got that, you need to have the proof that you received an honorable discharge with that too, okay? Also, your VA papers. There may be benefits down the road available for you, and we need that information. Birth certificates, deeds for real estate. We can pull those up, but if you've got the originals, those are worth putting in the file. Death certificates, certified ones especially, for loved ones that have died before you. So maybe a spouse or even a child. If we're going to convey real estate or interest down the road, we need proof of death. So that's important to have those available. How about a list of your medications, including dosage, the pharmacy that you get them at, and the prescribing doctor? Names and contact information for those physicians themselves and the reason you see them. Utility bills. Put copies of the bills in there. There are several utilities these days. We need account numbers and contact information. When it comes to bank accounts, we need information for checking, savings, CDs, IRAs, 401ks, your pension, Social Security, life insurance policies, annuities, VA benefits, anything like that. You want to include the account numbers, copies of the statements, phone numbers, contact information for any advisors and bank contacts. Health insurance information, including your Medicare card and any kind of supplemental insurance. Remember, the Medicare cards are not identified by your Social Security number anymore, so it's got a different number on it. Hey, also your Social Security card, copy of that. Long-term care policies, if you have any, or any other kind of coverage. Not very many people have those, but if you have it, we need to know about it. Tax returns or a tax affidavit if you no longer file, and contact information for your accountant or your tax preparer. If you've got a safe deposit box, we need to know the location and what's in there. Maybe make an inventory of that and include that. Here's one you might not think about. Passwords. What are your passwords for your online accounts? Combinations for safes and other accounts, online or otherwise. This is information that we don't have oftentimes, and it's important to have. How about good neighbors? You got a neighbor down the street or across the street that is just a great person and watches out for your parents or watches out for you. How about their name and phone number so we can reach out to them in an emergency? Caregiver contact information. And then you could even, have a calendar of the regular routine for the week. So these are just some thoughts. It's not, completely inclusive. Trust me, these things are important. I've seen more assets missing because the surviving family didn't have any information available on them, or the person themselves had just plain old forgot about some random account they had back in the day. And those missing assets account for billions. There's websites where you can look up whether you have an asset that's in your name. So there's ways you can look for these things, like I said, but rather than have to do detective work on the back end, I think it is very valuable to have this done on the front end. So, and you're also going to want to make sure the agents, the people that you put in charge and your powers of attorney, have contact with some of these organizations and are aware of your estate planning decisions, and that they've given consent to certain individuals to make decisions for you when you no longer can. So I recommend that those powers of attorney and other relevant authorizations be sent to banks, investment firms, doctors, all of that, so they can have it in the file ahead of time when the need arises. So I've touched on the more immediate items in this episode, as I meant it to be a response, like I said, to what you do following a dementia diagnosis. This is a long road and requires immediate and sequential planning as circumstances arise. But you need to have a plan as to how you will respond. Options along the way, that's what I say. And I'm going to leave that discussion for another episode coming up, because those decisions are complex as well, very difficult. Planning on what you do up front will help with those decisions to be made down the road. That's just the bottom line, okay? So I do have a number of resources that will be on my website for you at nancykogar.com. And those should help you with either outlining some of the things we've talked about or showing you where to look for some of the additional help and questions to ask. I sure hope this has been helpful today. I'm not sure I've answered all the questions out there, but if you have a question, I always say this, contact me and let me know what it is, and maybe we can answer it on an upcoming show. Let me know what you think of the show. I've heard from some of you, and it's so good to know that you're enjoying this and that it's helpful to you. That's what I want. So if you've got a particular issue and you want, to suggest a show on that, let me know about that too. I want this to be a resource for you as you walk through some complex territory, and you will need help along the way, legal, medical, and probably otherwise. So, hopefully, this will help you to become better aware of the complexity of these issues and the potential pitfalls. And most importantly, as I said, be better prepared. That's my desire. So I'm going to end with a little encouragement, but I did want to say that, guess what? The podcast is now on YouTube. Isn't that exciting? Yes, I'm excited about that. Let me know if you see us on YouTube. We're also on Spotify, of course, Apple Podcasts, and my website, nancykogar.com. And if this is your first time listening with us, thanks for joining us. And I would really suggest that you take some time to listen to some of the other episodes. There is, in my opinion, some really valuable information in those episodes. So take some time to do that. Caregiving is not easy. That's probably the understatement of the century, right? But I found some reflections that I wanted to share. So I thought these may be encouraging to you in our final minutes together today. First off, there are only 4 kinds of people in the world. Do you know what those are? Those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver. You can't argue with that, right? So it's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. Lena Horne, the singer, said that. And caregiving often calls us to lean into love we didn't know was possible. It does require more. But the experience can be lasting with your loved one as you walk that walk with them. Remember, the dementia patient is not giving you a hard time. The dementia patient is having a hard time, right? And those with dementia are still people, and they will have stories, and they still have character, and they are still individuals, and they are all unique, and they just need to be interacted with on a human level. Let's not forget people's dignity, right? That is so important. So thank you for this time, and I wanted to let you know that I do continue to pray about this podcast and for all of you out there, and I look forward to these times together. So thank you for joining me today, and I will see you next time, I hope. And in the meantime, don't forget to go to my website, nancykogar.com, and those resources will be there for you. And there's some other things from other shows, so I hope those are helpful to you. Okay? I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.